I'm deeply honoured to go after these two great speakers. Those fantastic guys, and I'd like to tie this theme together if I can. Drone spoke about efficient markets, and this afternoon hopefully I'll try and present some efficiencies or lack of efficiencies in that theme, and also James spoke about risk. I'll attempt to tie that into my speech as well, so well done guys. My topic was titled Branding versus Hedging, and you're probably thinking what a stupid topic, because I was there for a little bit as well. I suppose it's the Nuffield way. You take yourself out of your comfort zone and push yourself as hard as you can, and this particular topic has taken me out of my comfort zone, which is really production based and moving on beyond the farm gate in terms of pricing strategies and branding and markets. So it's been a fantastic experience. A big part of this, I suppose, we get the recognition of being a scholar, and we'll hold that recognition for a long time, but really the people behind us are the real heroes, in my opinion. My three daughters, Macy, Harriet and Georgia, I suppose it's been tough on them, but really I think my experience has made me more worldly, and I think that I'll be able to pass that on to them. I think they'll be better off than I will be, because I've had this experience. I'll be able to pass that on to them, which I think is an extension again of this program. Family farming business. Yeah, so my father drew a soldier, my grandfather, sorry, drew a soldier's settlers block after World War II. He developed a vineyard back in the day with a shovel and a crowbar. And that work ethic, I suppose, we still hold in our family today. I work with my parents, Ian and Colleen. I work, and my wife's involved as well. I'm coupled with, obviously, family problems. We've been right in the middle of succession planning, which has proved rather interesting. It's been good to get stuck into succession planning and then take some time away and rethink in a foreign country, which has been great. We're irrigated agriculture, so really we're based on return per meg, and when I hear conversations and presentations from Emily and Jan today around using 10% of their water, I think to myself, why am I doing what I'm doing when, and you know, the sheer cost of water these days is astronomical. My objectives. I suppose I'll start with my objectives, and I'll try to paint the picture of why I came up with these objectives, and it's really not only about the farmer, but it's about the industry. So I really wanted to look at rice futures markets. They don't exist in any form, and I also wanted to look at the branded product, because half of my business, we produce commodities that were just traded on price, for example my wheat or my canola, but the other half of my business, the rice, we are, due to the cooperative that we used to have in our company, we are quite a very successful branded value-added product globally, and I really want to leverage that up, but I think it's quite unique in the Australian context. So just talking about the industry, because as again it's not just about the farmer. The Rice Marketing Board Act basically says that all rice grown in New South Wales must be delivered to one buyer, which is Sunrice, and effectively it's a single desk. That actually was under review. It gets reviewed every 5 years, and that we've had every time we come up against the same questions. You know, it's not against the current economic ethos of having a single desk, yet we prove time and time again that we can, I suppose we make a premium out of it by having one buyer. We're only a small producer, so it's very important to us. So as I said, it was a co-op. It's now a company with restricted trade only between growers. It's an A-class share and a B-class share. The A-class share is the growers and the B-class share is the capital, which basically is ex-growers. They own the company. I just want to paint that picture, because I'll come back at the end. I'll come into my recommendations and why and how. Just some of our products that we've got, and if you see the one on the left-hand side, that was one from the early 50s when the co-op was first set up. It's one of their first marketing campaigns to the Australian household, the cook, I suppose you could say, or I call my wife the chef. So yeah, you know, and these are some of the products that have been developed. So the problem, and again coming to James's comment around risk, the farmer, I mean, it's a price risk conversation. We plant our crop in October. We don't harvest it until March or April. We don't know the price when we plant, so who wears that risk? Currently we deliver into a pool. The pool returns have been quite good, but growers are saying, well, we want to know the price when we plant because we can plant other things. So, okay, righto, that's fine, we can see what we can do. Along that growing period, you run the risk of input prices going up. You know, seed and fertiliser, I suppose, don't vary that much, but the water price can spread anywhere from $2 a megalitre to $250 a megalitre, and during the drought was $1,000 a megalitre. People paid $1,000 a megalitre were effectively your timber corps, the Ponzi schemes that were built up to be the most efficient water use. That's where all the water should go because they make the most money. None of them exist anymore. Production risk, the weather. When I left, I was irrigating my seed canola crop. I went out in the morning at 6 o'clock in the morning to change water, and everything was completely frosted. Completely unusual, not normal, but that's probably going to cost, you know, a significant amount of money. We can't offload that production risk in Australia. The problem for the industry, as I said, it's an industry-based thing. The problem for Sunrice is it's a supply risk. So, as we've heard from some other speakers today, continuity of supply for brands is so important. You can't just put a brand out there and pull it off the shelf and put it on the shelf. Your customer won't stay. They just won't. They're not interested. They've got an attention span of a flea, so to speak. So it's very important that continuity of supply exists. So, over and above that, Sunrice has invested in significant assets. We own drying facilities based around quality. We own mills, packaging plants. This stuff has been paid off effectively over the last 70 years. They were originally funded by the New South Wales government, and there was a bond system. So this has taken us 70 years to pay off these assets, and now we run the risk of having supply variations, and I'll show you why. This is Australian rice production. Now, I won't go as far to say that anyone can run a business on that steady increase, but at the end of the day, with that steady increase, your ability to invest in assets, your people, your infrastructure is of a fairly consistent tracking up. Now, from the early 2000s, we've seen that drop dramatically for a number of reasons, I suppose. One of them was drought. We all went through that down in the south. I can't talk for the NT, but down south the drought was profound and had long-term effects on the way that we operate, especially in the irrigation system. For me, I started farming in 2003. I had 2 good seasons, then I had effectively 8 years of drought. Now, for me, that was a positive experience. I was lucky enough to work as a commercial agronomist on the side. I probably learnt more as a commercial agronomist than I did on the farm. However, we still face challenges moving forward. Changes, not only was it the drought, but water policy changes. Water policy, travelling globally, and not part of my topic, but an interest. Water policy in Australia and our water markets are incredibly efficient in terms of, they're very advanced, they're very cutting edge, but again, it's affected the staple crops like rice. So, futures markets. What are they and how would they help the Australian rice industry? Part of that conversation about the drop in supply is there's been new crops have entered the area into our valleys, the Murrumbidgee Valley and the Murray Valley. Why would a futures market help? It's the ability to lock in the price when you plant. Now, it doesn't have to be at the grower level. I'm not a fan of growers using futures markets. I think they're sophisticated. I think that they should be done at an industry level and have dedicated resources to these options. But they do provide the ability to fix in the price and offload the risk to someone else. Now, in light of that, what is a futures market? It's not that hard. It sounds like it's Star Trek, but it's not. It's just a contract to exchange a commodity, but for a price, but at a point in time. And if you think of it in those simple terms, then you start to get your head around. That's why I said at the start, it quite literally pushed me mentally, which is fantastic. So what do the futures markets then do for market efficiency and pricing, which Jerome talked about today? Transparency and price discovery. That's what it's about. Those markets, they're a single reference point, for example, on the Chicago Board of Trade. Anyone can look it up and find out what the price is. You can make your own decisions around whether that's correct or incorrect, and then it comes back to that conversation around information. And the information around that, growers are very limited in access to that. They're focusing on growing, not actually on these markets again. So that's why I say it should be done at industry level, not done at a grower level. And the markets consist of three things: the buyer, which effectively is the processor, the seller, which is the grower, and the speculator. And I've grappled with this a little bit. Friend or foe, the speculator. These guys have no connection to the farm. They have no connection to the production system. They have no connection to the consumer. Why are they there? They are there, in their eyes, to profit. Well, I say they're not a friend, they're a foe. But in actual fact, they are a friend. Without the speculator, there is no liquidity. Now, what does that mean? You must have liquidity to get price discovery and make the exchanges, because with these markets on any given day, there is not necessarily going to be the exact amount of buyers and the exact amount of sellers. So they are definitely a part of the system, whether you like it or you don't. So my travels, existing futures markets. There's definitely a futures market in the Chicago Board of Trade. Our Japan group was very, very lucky. We got to literally walk onto the floor. It was a fantastic experience. Everyone was a little bit gobsmacked. That level of access due to the Nuffield program was absolutely priceless. Now, the Chicago Board of Trade, in terms of the rough rice futures, it's a long grain futures contract which has no relevance to Australia, and I suppose has no relevance really to some of the long grain producing countries either, because they don't use them. Japanese futures markets. The original rice futures market was in Japan back in the 1800s. They've done some trials on a few different markets in more recent years. They had a 3-year trial. They, believe it or not, that it's set to fail, and the reason is because people are fearful that a futures market will actually increase volatility, not decrease volatility, which goes against the ethos of having a futures market. However, people aren't going to participate, and I'll go on a little bit further why. So the challenges, so no liquidity, so that no people are trading, but the real reason at the end of the day is government control and intervention. Globally, rice is a staple food for 2/3 of the world's population. It is predominantly grown and eaten where it's grown. So I suppose it's important not only to the society of these countries, but the governance and the stability of these countries. So wherever the governments can get involved in these marketplaces and use leverage over the supply or the demand, they do. So when you go to a futures market, speculators and traders aren't interested because there's too many variables. You look at the supply and demand, you go, well, I think I can work out where this market's going. You chuck a government change in there and the whole thing, all bets are off. Over and above that, rice is very differentiated. Long grain, short grain, your sushis, which is a premium, which we play in that space, medium grain and fragrant rice. So you can't get a standard contract when you've got that many different types of rice, and I'll just give you one example. This is the long grain futures versus the medium grain paddy crop price in the US. I was lucky enough to meet with a grain trader passionate about rice futures. He used to be the head buyer of Mars Foods and was very passionate about rice futures and attempting to get them up. But again, you can see the differentiation between rice just isn't rice. So the chances of it happening are quite slim. The American market, I was lucky enough to travel through America. Met with some fantastic people. The California industry is very similar to ours, except it's deregulated. They have, instead of us having one purchaser, they have multiple purchasers. They have multiple mills. They have multiple storage agreements. It is quite chaotic. You can put it into pools. You can put it into cash price. You can put it into a co-op. It was hard for me to get my head around. It was that complicated that at the end of the day, for some of these growers, their bank was telling them where to put it into. So they wouldn't let the bank wouldn't let them put it into the pool because it would take too long to get paid. Didn't matter what the net price was. It was all about cash flow. So they would take a discount and put it into the cash price, which that's where the mill made up the money, rather than put it into the pool. It was hard to get your head around. But the key point, and talk about risk, was crop insurance. The Americans have got crop insurance. And I said to one of the growers I met with over there, I said, do you have any idea how many farms I would own if I didn't have any production risk? They can offload the production risk in terms of crop failure. They can offload the price risk in going down. They can even offload a late planting. If they don't get their crop in because it's too wet, then the government pays them not to plant it. For me, that crop insurance was by far and the best form of risk management. Now, it was, sorry, I didn't think I would go over. It was 60% funded by the government, so the true costs of these premiums weren't really reflective of the risk. I'll just touch briefly on branded products, because I know that I'm in front of the cocktail party as well. So for us, you know, given the fact that there's no futures market and the capacity to offload the risk and provide forward pricing, the only way for us, the Australian rice industry, to move forward is branded products, so in high volume areas. And I saw a few examples of this. And forgive me, Jody, our Japanese host, this is a Japanese word for, it's pronounced museuma. It's a rice, and it's a pre-washed rice. In Japan, very cultural. The housewife will go home and pre-wash the rice, right? Now, this was a product that was already pre-washed, and this was commanding a significant premium over the normal rice. Japan, a fantastic market, high-value market. This was some rice that was being marketed in cold store boxes, and it gives a graph of the cooking qualities: light, sticky, hard, soft. Really about the customer experience, which was fantastic. Another guy we met with in Japan, small mill, because it's such a high premium market. At the end of the day, these mills were viable because the milling costs were huge, but they were viable because of the price of the market. I'll briefly touch on global food trends and where this sits for us, the rice industry. And I had Dan's wife the other day sit down for tea and say, before the Nuffield presentation, she found out that she was a celiac, and I hope that didn't affect me as a grain grower. I said, no, that's fantastic because I'm a rice grower. So, you know, we're gluten-free, low GI, and something I found globally was, not to get the two mixed up, but rice bran. It's a byproduct that we sell into the stock food industry. It could be the next superfood, which is a global trend. And a few presenters today have touched on food safety, labelling and traceability. So some possible markets that we could get into in higher premium, the dessert market. If you see a picture down the bottom, that's a restaurant in New York, Rice to Riches. They just sell rice pudding. Takeaway, you can get thousands of different types of rice pudding. In New Zealand, we saw some different concepts like My Food Bag, and obviously Amazon. A few people have talked about that. So the outcomes, for me, rice futures markets is highly unlikely. So for us to secure supply moving forward is going to be quite challenging. Thus gets to the recommendations. I suppose, coming back to that branded product, we need to innovate in some premium market segments. Basically build confidence in the industry by having great returns. That's my answer to the problem. We can provide some contracts for specialty varieties back-to-back, for example, sushi rice and smaller volume varieties. All in all, as I said at the start, it's a difficult topic to get your head around, but for me, I've learned an enormous amount, and I'm hoping that I can take this back to the industry and take the industry forward over the next decade. So thank you.